Good evening, everyone, or early morning, afternoon, whatever it is, where you are or when you're watching this. As always, dealing with more heavy topics, it seems a little trite to be starting this off with giving my dog a treat, but that's what she expects. So lay down. There you go. That takes care of Candy. I see I have a couple people watching. The live chat is on. If you want to put up some comments in the live chat, you're most welcome. I do enjoy engagement. Uh, and as always, likes and subscriptions are appreciated. I'll talk about that more at the end. Anyway, my voice is going a little scratchy. Talking about springboarding off the video I did yesterday. Yesterday, my video centered on this question of did Israel steal the land? And there's this all too common misconception, misreading, total ignorance of history. And people don't even know how Israel came into being, how it came into existence. There are individuals who will say that the UN or Britain or a combination of the two handed the nation of Israel to them on a silver platter, which totally ignores history. The simple fact of the matter is, historical fact, which I invite everyone to verify. The British ruled this area. It was British territory. From the end, actually, they took control of it toward the end of World War I. And then from 1918 until 1948, it was British territory. It was their mandate. They were the governing, ruling authority in Palestine. Starting at the end of the war, Palestine included all of present-day Israel, all of present-day Jordan. They carved off a section in 1921 and gave it to their Hashemite allies who had fought alongside them in World War I, and they took part of their Palestinian mandate, so part of Palestine, and they handed it to the Arabian dynasty called the Hashemite family and gave it to them to rule. They had been deposed in Saudi Arabia. They were Arabians, not Palestinians, but they stole or gave them, handed them on a silver platter, 75% of the British mandate as it had been established. Britain started ruling this territory late in 1917 as the First World War was drawing to a conclusion, and their mandate was put down in writing and formalized during the San Remo Conference of 1920, a little town on the Italian Riviera, a breakout of the Paris peace agreements that were going on to settle out how everything was going to shake out after World War I had ended. It's where we get the Treaty of Versailles from, that dealt with Germany, and this San Remo conference dealt with the Middle East, established mandates for Syria, French mandate for Syria, British mandate for Mesopotamia, British mandate for Palestine. So the land was occupied by both Jews and Arabs. Going back through all of history and all of recorded history. And leading up to 1948, the British had an expiry date on their mandate. The expiry date was May 15th, 1948. That's when British rule, British control of the mandated territory would end. And at that point, all that remained of the British mandate for Palestine was a small little strip, size of New Jersey, about 25% of the original mandate. And now it was going to be, it was not a country, it was not a territory, no one was ruling over it. So what happened is on May 14th, the day before the mandate expired, the Jewish leadership under Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, declared itself unilaterally independent as an independent nation state, similar in a fashion to the way the United States declared its independence unilaterally on July 4, 1776, their Declaration of Independence. Now, the United States of America was not established as an independent country on July 4, 1776. A lot of historians will say that was a declaration of war. And I think it's fair to say that the Zionist Declaration of Independence on May 14th, 1948, equally was a declaration of war. There was this territory that had been ceded. There is no governing authority anymore. There's no ruling nation. So what's going to happen? And what ensued was a war. Up until the end of World War I, the rule of Palestine, if you want to call it that, although for the Ottomans, it wasn't Palestine, it was their Syrian province or Syrian district. It was the southern part of that Syrian district or province. But when the British came along, they redrew all the maps. The Kurds got nothing. They had all their land stolen from them. There was no Kurdistan created. And the Kurdish population was divided amongst differing nations, so that they went from being a majority in their own territory to a minority in foreign country. These new countries that Britain and France established. But Palestine on May 14th, 15th, 1948 was without a governing authority, and a war ensued. And it was a war between the Jewish population and the Arab population, as well as 5 nations of the Arab League. I've said it many times: Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and the Saudi Arabians. They all engaged in a brutal, nearly year-long war from May 15th, 1948 until March of 1949. They fought a brutal war. And the result of that war was that the Zionist forces, if you want to call them that — I don't have an issue with the word Zionist or Zionism — they won. They won the war. This territory, which had no governing authority at all, not a Palestinian governing authority, not a British governing authority, not an Ottoman governing authority. The Zionist forces had won this war. There were only around 750,000 Jews in all of what remained of the former British Mandate of Palestine, and there were a similar number of Arabs. However, the majority of them left. Some left before the war broke out because they knew it was coming. Some fled during the fighting, and others left after the fighting was over. The Jews, however, stayed and fought, and they won. And that's simple reality. And so in 1949, the new nascent state of Israel signed armistice or peace agreements with the belligerent nations that they'd been at war with. And a border was established, what is referred to now as the Green Line. And in 1949, after the war ended, Israel did not control the West Bank. Jordan had conquered that territory. Jordan had also conquered East Jerusalem, and the West Bank and East Jerusalem, to the victor go the spoils. They ethnically cleansed the Jewish population out of the West Bank and East Jerusalem. A Jordanian commander famously stated that for the first time in 1,000 years, East Jerusalem has no Jews, because Jews had maintained a continuous presence in Jerusalem and in Israel going back to biblical times. Even though the diaspora, when Jews had been scattered to the 4 corners of the earth, That had happened, but some Jews did remain. Sometimes that population got down in and around 10,000, but there were always Jews living in what today is Israel. And so in June of 1949, I would place that as when Israel was formally established as an independent nation state, because that is the day it was in June. I don't know the specific day, but it was June of 1949 when the United Nations recognized Israel as an independent nation state. So now we have after fighting a nearly year-long brutal war, the former, what used to be British territory, and before that was Ottoman territory, and before the Ottomans, it was the Mamluks. And you can go back, different governing authorities had controlled this. If you go back to biblical times, Joshua and his armies, under Solomon and David, but then the Babylonians conquered it. The Greeks conquered it. The Romans conquered it. The governing authority has passed through many hands, and in between those times, there were periods of Jewish independence or Israeli independence. Although for a time it was referred to as Israel, it was called Judah or Judea. It's where we get Jew, the word Jew, from. It's born out of, rather than saying Judean, well, you shorten it. Shortening things is something that's been done throughout history. So rather than going Judean, just Jew. So does Israel have a right to exist? Because that's the crux of everything that has gone on since. There is a very significant portion of the Arab world that does not recognize that Israel has a right to exist. Hamas does not recognize Israel's right to exist. They want Palestine. They want to establish a new nation state called Palestine from the river to the sea. That's all of Israel. The river is the Jordan River. The sea is the Mediterranean Sea. So when they say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, that means we're getting rid of Israel. They have no right to exist. And that is the justification for the attacks that have been taking place on Israel on October 7th and for all of its history. Israel has constantly been under attack by those who want to wipe it off the map, who want all the Jews either pushed into the sea, killed, or expelled. And if you don't think that Israel has the right to exist, fair enough. But if you do think that Israel has the right to exist, then they do have the right to defend themselves. 1967, they were attacked, another attack, another war. This time in 1967, sometimes referred to as the Six-Day War or the Second Arab-Israeli War. It was Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. Those were the combatants. Those three nations against this 20-ish, not even 20-year-old nation of Israel. And in that war, Egypt lost the Gaza Strip. The people living in the Gaza Strip up until 1967 were not Palestinians, because there's never been a country called Palestine. They were Egyptian. And Egypt lost that territory, that Gaza Strip. They lost it to Israel, along with the Sinai Peninsula. Jordan lost the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And the Syrians lost the Golan Heights. War. and this has gone on throughout all of human history. To the victor go the spoils. But for some, they say, well, not now. Israel should just allow itself to be wiped off the map. They should not respond to these attacks. When October 7th took place, everyone knows the story. Thousands of rockets fired into Israel. The border fence or security fence broken down. Hamas militants and other groups like Islamic Jihad sending their militants, if you like that. I prefer that word, militants, into music festival, indiscriminately killing men, women, and children, taking hostages, including infants, babies, back into Gaza to be held hostage. And how is Israel to respond? Do they have a right to exist? If they have the right to exist, then they have the right to defend themselves and to engage in whatever is required to ensure the safety and the survival of their nation state. And Hamas's leadership, told the world that October 7th was just a rehearsal. This is just the start. We're going to do this again and again until the ultimate goal of wiping Israel off the map, pushing all the Jews into the sea, or killing or expelling all of them until Israel is wiped off the map. This is just a rehearsal. We're going to keep going. And what is Israel to do? Are they simply to wait for the next attack? What they have done in response, and it is brutal, because Gaza is the most densely populated place on the planet Earth. If it's not the most densely populated, it's right up near the top. It's an incredibly tightly packed, densely populated, tiny little strip of land. I think it's only 5 or 6 kilometers wide, 15 or so kilometers from north to south. It's a very small little area with a large population, in and around 2 million people in this tiny little area. And Hamas is not going to take their militant forces out onto the open battlefield and engage with the IDF and say, okay, we're going to get away from our civilian population and we're going to meet you out on the battlefield. This isn't the 1800s European warfare. This is referred to as asymmetrical warfare. Hamas has spent billions of dollars in money that they've received in foreign aid and from supporters. And rather than building infrastructure and improving the life of Gazans, they've built a network of tunnels larger than the New York City subway system. Even Al Jazeera, an Arab media outlet, acknowledges, the Gaza Metro is how it is referred. That's what we call in Montreal. That's what they call their subway system, the Metro, le Metro. They call their tunnel network a metro. And they have infrastructure underneath command centers, munition storage facilities down in this tunnel network. And if you're Israel and you want to ensure that your right to exist, you're protecting your right to exist, you want to ensure your existence and the existence of your children and whatever is to come to follow, how do you respond? Okay, they killed 1,200. Do you kill 1,200 innocent Palestinians the way they killed 1,200? Do you go into Gaza and kidnap their babies and bring them back and hold them hostage? I don't think, honestly, and this may sound somewhat unkind and very pejorative, but I honestly don't think Hamas gives a rat's rosy rear end about their civilian population. They're cannon fodder. They're good for the propaganda war. They can embed themselves within the civilian population so that if Israel wants to try and eliminate Hamas, collateral damage, as it's often referred to, is an inevitable result. And so then you can flood the internet and newscasts and social media spaces with horrific images that are the result of Hamas's actions on October 7th. And this is just simply reality. I know that the people of the Gaza Strip and that the people of the West Bank, that the word apartheid has been used. Gaza has been referred to as an open-air prison. But the question is, why were those measures put in place? If the Arab world would recognize Israel's right to exist, if they would simply recognize that Israel has the right to exist and stop trying to wipe them off the map, then there wouldn't be the need for a security fence. There wouldn't be the need for these draconian measures, so that someone wanting to leave Gaza or leave the West Bank wouldn't have to go through military checkpoints and everything such as that. But when you have a large population that includes individuals who are bent on utterly destroying the nation state that you fought, bled, and died for in 1948, 1949, that view that defeat as a humiliation. And it was a catastrophic humiliation for the Arab world when Israel won that war. You had this open territory with no governing authority, and you had 5 nations, as well as I don't know how many of the Arab Palestinian population stayed and fought, but they had Egypt on their side, and Saudi Arabia, and Lebanon, and Jordan, and Syria, 5 nations. Those 5 nations in 1948-49, their combined population was over 30 million. There were only between 700,000 and 800,000 Jews living in Israel, men, women, and children. It should have been a walk in the park, you would think. There are Arabs who were living in Palestine, the former British Mandate, who before May 14th, 1948, there were Arab Palestinians who were told to leave by the Arabs. They said, you leave, we're going to wipe the Jews out, and then we'll establish a new country. What would have happened is moot. I mean, we'll never know, because that's not the way history unfolded. However, if those 5 nations had done what any reasonable person would expect them to do and had won, I mean, let's face it, come on, 5 nations against 1, populations of 30 million against a one-day-old country with a population of 700,000-800,000, should be a walk in the park. I've likened it before to, the LA Lakers taking on a Canadian high school basketball team and losing. A humiliating catastrophe. They call it in Arabic, they refer to it as the Nakba. And they were humiliated. It was a catastrophic loss, and they've never gotten over it. And from that time forward, 1967, the 6-Day War, 1973, the Yom Kippur War, attack. And when those wars all failed, then we have the intifadas, the uprisings, these terrorist-style attacks against Israeli civilians, and which has led Israel to put up a border fence around Gaza, to having a military presence on the West Bank to ensure that hostile actors can't come and do what they've done repeatedly to the nation state of Israel and Israelis. And Israelis can be 20% of the Israeli population is Arab, because not all the Arabs fled. 150-ish thousand stayed. And after the peace agreements were signed, after hostilities came to an end in March of 1949, Israel has Arab citizens who Israel has had Arabs who have held seats in their Knesset, their parliament. They've had I don't know if there's this individual is still, but they've had an Arab sitting on their Supreme Court. But ultimately, if we want to get this right down to the crux, right down to the get right down to brass tacks, this conflict is the entire result of the fact that the Arab world has not been able to get over the humiliating, catastrophic loss they suffered in 1949. It wasn't a total loss. The Arabs didn't lose everything. Egypt, at the end of that war, had gained control of some of the territory that used to be the British Mandate for Palestine. They got Gaza. The Jordanians managed to capture some of that. They already had part of Palestine, and they were able to add the West Bank to what they had, and they got East Jerusalem. Israel didn't try and seize East Jerusalem and the West Bank and Gaza in 1967. It was the result of war. And they also got the Golan Heights. That doesn't get talked about as much nowadays because the Golan Heights are largely unpopulated. They're more of a strategic area because from the Golan Heights, you look down into the valley of the Sea of Galilee, and that is a populated area. And so Syria would be able to put its ordnance, its artillery, its tanks up on the high ground looking down into the northern part of Israel. By them seizing those Golan Heights during that 1967 war, it enabled Israel to ensure its security, ensure its survival, ensure its right to exist. So ultimately, that's where things boil down. I'm going to wrap it up by saying that I did a video a week or so ago asking the question whether or not we're on the brink of World War III. And in that video, my conclusion is that no, I don't think we're on the brink of World War III, but we're moving in that direction. We're heading towards that. And things have escalated since I did that video. The U.S. suffered an attack. A drone got into a military base in Jordan and killed 3 individuals and seriously injured dozens more. I think it's around 40 U.S. service personnel were injured during that assault, that drone attack, and 3 service members were killed. And now the U.S. has retaliated by hitting military targets linked to Iran, because this is where it gets so complex. But Iran is fighting a proxy war. Iran backs Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the 3 H's. They back them, but they give them plausible deniability. They say, "Oh, we didn't advise them to do the attack on October. That has nothing to do with us. Yeah, we fund them, we finance them, we provide them with arms, we provide them with advice, but we didn't advise them to do that." And the same with the Houthis and Hezbollah. So they've got this nice little buffer, and they have other groups as well. And it was one such group that were an Iran-backed group, someone attached to their Republican Guard, their military force. They were deemed responsible for the attack on this Jordanian U.S. military base. So the U.S. struck back, and they hit targets in Syria and in Iraq. And now the U.S. has been condemned, and there are promises of retaliation coming from all corners of the Arab world, from Syria, Iraq, and Iran, from Hamas, from Hezbollah, from the Houthis. And the Houthis, that is Yemen. In my mind, they're synonymous. The Houthis control 80% of the country. They're the de facto governing authority in Yemen. They are sometimes referred to as the opposition. They're not the opposition. They're ruling. They rule 80% of the country, including the capital. Bit of a civil war. Yemen, bit of a civil war. No one cares about the fact that 400,000 roughly Yemenis have been killed in the last 10 years or so, many by starvation, many women and children, because of the civil war that's been going on in Yemen between the Houthis and the Saudi-backed royal family. So, but that's okay. It's okay if 400,000 Yemenis are being killed over a 10-year period because the news doesn't talk about it. The news ignores it. But I've gone on too long already. Just wrap it up by saying that World War I, everyone says the start of World War I. What was the cause of World War I? Was the assassination, murder of Archduke Ferdinand and his wife. And they said that's what started World War I. Well, I think the way things are progressing, I think it won't, another year or two, people might be saying that October 7th of 2023, that was the start of World War III. We're seeing the dominoes start to fall. And all that needs to happen is, it's difficult to put yourself in the mindset of someone engaged in military conflict. You're on edge. You can be on a hairpin trigger, and mistakes can be easily made. And now we have drones and everything else, and a tragic mistake can happen, and then things just explode. But thank you for watching. I don't like, I've been going on a bit too long of late. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far and you don't mind hitting the thumbs up, I appreciate it. I've gotten this miserable, pathetic, unmonetized, zero production value YouTube channel that I have is, I'm up over 180 subscribers, which is unreal. I mean, it's nothing in the YouTube world where tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions is, that's big. But for something like this, just Joe Nobody Canadian in a little tiny corner of southeastern Ontario, injecting himself into the public sphere and trying to, an old white guy who Christian, straight, I've got every box for being canceled is ticked off. Who gets silenced in today's world? If you're white, you're silenced. If you're Christian, you're silenced. If you're straight, heterosexual, silenced. Anyway, that's the end. Thank you very much for watching. God bless. Probably there's a little bit more I want to say on the Alistair Begg controversy. I'll probably do my next video on that, but we'll see. Things are happening all the time. Something might pop up. Talk to you very soon. God bless.